All right, so you ready to dive into this deep dive?
Oh, absolutely. Always up for a good deep dive, especially one like this.
You sent in a piece of fiction, right?
Yeah.
And you want to unpack the relationship dynamics, huh?
Yeah. Some of the spicier elements are what I'm really curious about. It looks like we're going to be exploring BDSM and polyamory.
Okay, so we're talking about how those aspects shape the characters' connections then.
Exactly.
It's fascinating how fiction can be such a powerful tool, isn't it, for exploring, complex themes.
Oh, for sure. Especially when you're dealing with intimacy and power dynamics.
Yeah, and especially when they intersect with less conventional relationship structures, right?
Exactly. Like the ones we're about to get into.
So to set the scene, we've got Bella, Edward, and Jazz.
Okay, so our main players.
All tangled up in this, well, kind of intricate romantic web.
Sounds juicy.
Oh, it is. And, from the excerpts you shared, it's clear the author isn't shying away from exploring the complexities of BDSM.
Oh, so we're talking the full spectrum then.
Yeah, we're talking rope bondage, flogging, teasing denial. I mean, the whole 9 yards.
Wow, they're really diving deep. And what I find interesting is how these elements aren't just like isolated events. They're woven into the everyday fabric of their lives.
Yeah, they're influencing everything. Conflicts, communication, and ultimately their growth as individuals and partners.
It's all connected.
Exactly. So let's look at Bella and Edward, for example. Their relationship seems to be like the foundation of this whole story.
Okay, so they're our anchor.
And Edward definitely takes the dominant role.
No question there.
He plans these elaborate scenes, but then we see Bella asking him to, explain his thought process.
Oh, interesting.
It's almost like she wants to be a co-creator, not just a participant.
That's a really astute observation. It suggests that Bella isn't seeking, just a simple power reversal, but more like a deeper understanding and engagement with Edward's dominant side.
Right, exactly. And then things get even more interesting, right?
Oh, I bet.
Yeah.
What happens?
When Jazz enters the picture, he's initially introduced as a third party during a scene with Bella and Edward. And Bella seems totally comfortable with it.
Okay, so she's on board.
Edward, not so much. He's wrestling with some serious jealousy.
It's a classic example of how polyamory can challenge,
Yeah.
even those who think they're secure.
Totally.
Yeah.
And the story doesn't shy away from portraying those raw emotions, the ones that can surface even when you understand the concept intellectually.
Oh, absolutely. The heart wants what it wants. Sometimes logic goes out the window.
Speaking of challenges, the dynamic between Bella and Edward keeps evolving, right?
Keep going. I'm hooked.
So we see Bella starting to express her own desires and boundaries. And she even mentions wanting to, top Edward.
Whoa, a power shift.
This feels like a significant power shift, wouldn't you say?
Absolutely. This highlights such a crucial aspect of healthy BDSM relationships.
Yeah.
Consent and negotiation.
It's not just about switching roles, though, right? It's about Bella communicating her desires and Edward, adapting to this new dynamic.
Right. And it seems like the author is emphasizing the potential for growth and change within their BDSM relationship, rather than presenting this static power structure.
So it's not just about dominance and submission. It's about mutual exploration and evolution.
Exactly.
And then we have Alice, their close friend. She disapproves of both the polyamory and Edward's role in the relationship.
Oh, that's going to create some tension.
Oh, it does, especially between Alice and Bella.
Yeah, Alice's perspective is interesting because it kind of reflects societal norms, judgments. Yeah. Those are things unconventional relationships often face. It seems like the author might be using this conflict to explore, the characters' convictions and their willingness to, stand by their choices, even when
they face disapproval.
Yeah, exactly, from their loved ones.
And then things get even messier, when Jazz accidentally reveals a detail about their past encounter.
Uh-oh.
Yeah, it forces them all to confront some unspoken feelings and issues.
This just highlights how important open and honest communication is, particularly in these kinds of relationships. Assumptions, unspoken expectations, they can easily lead to all sorts of problems.
Misunderstandings, hurt feelings, the whole works.
Exactly. And this is where the fictional exploration can be so insightful, We see the characters having to deal with their communication breakdowns, and they learn, and ultimately they develop this deeper understanding of themselves and each other.
I'm honestly already surprised by the emotional depth.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it initially seemed like a pretty straightforward story.
Erotic. Yeah.
But the author's weaving a complex tapestry of relationships and individual journeys.
It's amazing what a skilled author can do, isn't it? By delving into these, well, seemingly taboo topics, they can challenge our preconceived notions and reveal these unexpected nuances about relationships and intimacy.
So we've got this intense love triangle, BDSM, polyamory, and family drama all swirling together.
Sounds like quite the mix.
It is. Where do we even go from here?
Well, now that we've kind of laid the groundwork, seen these conflicts emerging, I think it's time to zoom in on some specific instances.
Right.
The ones that really showcase the complexities of their individual relationships. Like you mentioned Bella's desire to top Edward. What do you think drives that shift?
Now that's where it gets really interesting. Could it be a way for Bella to explore, I don't know, a different aspect of her own sexuality?
Yeah.
Or maybe assert a different kind of power in the relationship? I'm curious to see how Edward responds to this.
Me too. And how does this shift, reflect the broader societal norms they're pushing against? These are the questions that'll really give us a deeper understanding of their journey and the intricate tapestry of their relationship. Let's dive into that a little bit. Bella's desire to top Edward. You're right. It's not just about the physical. It's about the power dynamic and how that, it speaks volumes about their individual journeys and the way their relationship's evolving.
Yeah. And the author gives us these pretty vivid details, right, about how this plays out. There's a scene, Bella tells Edward how she wants to be restrained. She even suggests they use a pole in their playroom.
Okay, so that's pretty specific.
It is.
And that's a powerful example of Bella taking charge, shaping the scene. She's gaining confidence and she's exploring, different aspects of the power dynamics in their relationship.
It's almost as if she's saying, hey, I'm not just passively accepting this, I want to explore my own power and agency, all within this dynamic.
Exactly. And it's crucial that Edward responds in a way that respects her desires and boundaries.
And it seems like he does. He's initially surprised, but he's receptive. The author describes him as adapting to this new dynamic, which kind of suggests they have a healthy level of communication and respect.
It's a good reminder that healthy BDSM, it's not about one person dictating the terms. It's a two-way street. It's about mutual understanding, exploration, and a willingness to, negotiate boundaries and desires.
So it's not just dominance and submission. It's about finding a balance that works for both partners.
Exactly. And this balance, it can shift over time, just like we see with Bella and Edward. It really highlights the fluidity of power dynamics and how desires and needs can actually reshape a relationship, especially a BDSM relationship.
Let's bring Jazz back into this, shall we?
Okay, yeah, he's been kind of quiet for a while.
Yeah, he has. We saw Edward struggling with that jealousy. Remember?
Oh, yeah. It was pretty intense.
When Jazz was first introduced,
right.
The author actually uses some striking imagery to convey the raw emotions of polyamory, doesn't he?
Mm-hmm.
Remember when Edward describes himself and Jazz as two rabid dogs?
Oh, yeah. Barely able to hide their hostility behind a pleasant mask.
Yeah. That was a pretty intense image. Really speaks to the primal emotions that can surface. Even when the concept of polyamory is something you understand.
Yeah, intellectually you get it.
Right.
But emotionally, it's a whole different ballgame.
Yeah, and it's a good reminder, isn't it, that jealousy and insecurity, they can arise even in the most open and communicative relationships.
Definitely. And it's how you address and process those emotions that really determines the health and sustainability of the dynamic.
The story gives us a few concrete examples of how Edward's jealousy manifests, right?
Oh, fill me in.
Like that scene where he cuts off a waitress who's flirting with Jazz. He basically asserts his claim on Bella, but in this, very public way.
Oh, yikes. A little awkward. But, it highlights the challenges of navigating social situations, right? When polyamory isn't widely accepted or understood, Edward felt like he had to assert his ownership of Bella, kind of reflecting those societal pressures and judgments that unconventional relationships often face.
And Alice's disapproval adds to that, remember. She's uncomfortable with both the polyamory and Edward's role in their relationship.
Right. Alice's perspective is important. The author is using her, I think, to represent those societal norms and expectations, the ones that often clash with unconventional choices.
It creates tension, especially between her and Bella. Their friendship is put to the test.
It happens. It highlights how emotionally difficult it can be when you face disapproval from loved ones, especially those close to you. Bella is, she's protective of her choices and her relationships, even if it means, standing up to her best friend.
But it's interesting that Alice isn't portrayed as a villain. You see her struggling, right, with her own insecurities and just her inability to fully understand their choices.
Yeah, it humanizes her perspective. The author avoids those simplistic judgments and allows for complexity without necessarily condoning her actions.
Speaking of complex emotions, remember that moment when Jazz unintentionally reveals something about their past? Yeah. It forces them all to confront some unspoken feelings and issues.
This is classic, isn't it? Avoiding tough conversations can just lead to misunderstandings and hurt feelings.
And it exposes those cracks in their communication, right?
Oh, yeah.
And really highlights how important it is to address things head on. It seems like Edward, especially, has to do some soul searching after that. You remember?
Yeah.
He talks to his friend Rose, reveals his anxieties and uncertainties.
It shows a willingness to be vulnerable, to seek support outside the relationship. And that's important. Everyone needs a sounding board, even the most confident individuals.
It seems like the author is really hitting home that open and honest communication is crucial, especially in unconventional relationships.
Absolutely. And it's not just about expressing needs, it's also about listening,
Yeah.
Empathy, a willingness to compromise, all of it.
But even with the best intentions, there are bound to be setbacks, right?
Well, for sure.
And misunderstandings.
It's part of life.
Like when Edward overhears Jazz talking to Charlie, Bella's father. And Jazz actually defends their relationship. He even acknowledges Edward's flaws.
Oh, wow.
It shows, this level of understanding and acceptance that goes beyond those superficial judgments. Almost like he's saying, look, Edward's not perfect, but he loves Bella, and that's what matters.
Exactly. And it highlights, that relationships evolve. Your past experiences don't have to define you. Growth and change, they're possible, even in unconventional dynamics.
But Edward's insecurities are still there, He's bothered by the fact that Bella spent time with Jazz while he was away. It leads to a confrontation, and Bella calls him out on his jealousy.
Oh, I bet that was intense.
She demands an explanation. She's not letting it slide.
Good for her. It's important to address those things and not just sweep them under the rug.
Exactly. And Edward opens up about his past, revealing his insecurities to both Bella and Jazz. This feels like a turning point, doesn't it?
It does. They're being honest. Create space for deeper connection and understanding. And it's not just about talking, it's about action, too. Edward makes a conscious effort to be more present, more attentive to Bella's needs, even when it means pushing aside his own insecurities.
Right, and Bella starts taking on a more dominant role. There's even a scene where she tells Edward to call her mistress.
Wow. Another power shift.
Yeah.
That's so interesting because it really challenges traditional gender roles and power dynamics within BDSM, doesn't it? It shows that things can be fluid, flexible. Dominance and submission aren't fixed. They can shift depending on desires, context.
And Edward's willing to submit to her.
Oh, wow.
That just reinforces the mutual respect and trust. He's letting go of control. That's a big deal. For him,
Yeah.
This whole experience seems to be a catalyst for Bella's growth, too. She's more assertive and confident, both in and out of the bedroom.
What a beautiful example of how exploring power dynamics can lead to empowerment, self-discovery. The author's suggesting that BDSM, when it's practiced consensually and safely, can be a tool for personal growth and exploration.
But there's still bumps in the road.
Yeah.
Bella gets anxious about attending a BDSM party with Edward, worried about how others will perceive her.
That's so relatable, Even those who are confident in their choices, there's still vulnerability, self-doubt, all of it.
And Edward's response is perfect. He tells her, "You can't disappoint me, Bella."
Oh, that's sweet. It's simple, but it speaks volumes. Unconditional acceptance and support, that's so crucial, especially when you're dealing with those feelings. The vulnerability.
Their journey to the party is a wild ride. They have a confrontation with another woman who hits on Edward, and Bella's not having it.
She's not putting up with that anymore.
No, she isn't. She's not going to tolerate disrespect or any attempts to undermine their relationship.
Good.
Edward's proud of her. He admires her strength, her confidence.
It shows how much they've grown, right?
Yeah.
As individuals and as a couple. Supporting each other's journey, celebrating each other's strengths. It's a testament to the impact their relationships had on them.
And it keeps evolving. It's amazing. They challenge each other, push boundaries, and explore new facets of their relationship.
It highlights the importance of communication and negotiation, especially when you're dealing with these kinds of dynamics and multiple partners.
So we've explored their BDSM dynamic, the complexities of polyamory, and those external pressures from friends and family.
Wow, that's a lot.
It's a lot to unpack.
We've only just scratched the surface, haven't we?
I'm eager to see where their journey leads us next.
Me too. Let's delve into the next chapter and explore how they navigate their desires, their boundaries, their ever-evolving relationships, all of it. I feel like we haven't given Alice enough attention, you know?
Yeah, she's kind of been in the background lately.
At the start, she was disapproving of Bella and Edward. But now it seems like her own relationship with Jazz is, well, it's imploding.
And then she drops this bombshell that they hooked up back in college.
Talk about a plot twist.
I know, and the timing of this revelation, it couldn't be worse. It's during this BDSM party while Bella's in the middle of a scene.
You have to wonder, right, is Alice, I don't know, subconsciously trying to disrupt things? Like she's mirroring her own feelings of powerlessness with Jazz, maybe trying to regain control or, I don't know, distract from her pain.
It's a mess for sure. And Bella's reaction, it's telling. She's angry, but she ends up supporting Jazz, even though it means, going against Alice.
It really highlights Bella's loyalty, and her ability to see beyond the surface. She can see that Jazz is struggling, and she chooses to be there for him, even if it risks her friendship with Alice.
It shows how much she's grown and how much she's learned about relationships. She challenges those norms, and prioritizes the people she cares about, even when it's tough.
And she doesn't just pick sides. She tries to mediate, encourage them to talk openly and honestly.
She's like the emotional anchor, guiding them toward healthier communication and understanding. But sometimes, talking isn't enough.
Oh, absolutely. Sometimes things are just too broken.
Alice starts dating this new guy, Nate, and she's basically flaunting him in front of Jazz.
Ouch. Classic post-breakup behavior. It's like she's trying to make him jealous or something, maybe punish him.
Poor Jazz. He's still in love with Alice, struggling to cope with the separation.
It's heartbreaking. He's dealing with all of it: rejection, betrayal, guilt. It's a good reminder that men have feelings too, right? And they need support, especially during rough times.
And it's Bella and Edward who provide that support. They give him a shoulder to cry on, someone to listen.
It's beautiful, isn't it, their connection? It goes way beyond just romance.
They've created their own little family. A place where they can be vulnerable without judgment.
It's a powerful testament to human connection, finding your tribe, especially when you're, navigating relationships that aren't traditional. And it's interesting. It seems like Edward's starting to warm up to Jazz.
Oh, yeah. Remember that scene where they share a moment of intimacy with Bella?
Uh-huh.
It leads to some pretty insightful conversations and, a deeper understanding between them.
It's a turning point. They move past all the jealousy and rivalry, create space for a real connection.
It's not just physical. It's the emotional stuff afterward. They open up, share their fears, their insecurities.
That kind of honesty, it builds trust.
Yeah.
Allows them to see each other as people, not just their roles.
And through that vulnerability, they can finally let go of past hurt. Move forward with understanding and acceptance. It's powerful. How these unconventional relationships can be so challenging, but they can also be the catalyst for growth and healing.
The author is suggesting that these kinds of dynamics can force us to confront things, our limitations, our biases, and our capacity for love in ways that traditional relationships maybe don't.
This deep dive has been a journey. We've talked about BDSM, polyamory, jealousy, betrayal, forgiveness, and ultimately the power of love and connection. It's all in there.
The full spectrum of the human experience.
Right.
It reminds us that there's no one way to do relationships or experience love. And you know what? Happiness can be found in the most unexpected places.
And what strikes me is, even though this is fiction, it's also real. The challenges, the triumphs, these are things people deal with in real life. It's a reminder that love, intimacy, and power dynamics are universal. It doesn't matter what your relationship style is or your sexual preferences.
Absolutely. And by exploring these themes in fiction, it helps us understand ourselves better, our relationships, the different ways people connect and experience love.
So what's the big takeaway? It seems like the author is challenging all these preconceived notions about relationships and intimacy, encouraging us to embrace diversity and prioritize things like open communication and consent.
It's a call to action, isn't it? To move past judgment and create a world where love is celebrated, all forms of love.
I think we're left with a lot to think about. How do we define love in a world that tries to put us in boxes? How do we navigate power dynamics in a way that's healthy? How do we make space for real connection, vulnerability?
These are questions we all have to think about. And by exploring stories like this, we can challenge those assumptions and ultimately, build a world that's more inclusive and compassionate.
So that's it for our deep dive into Bella, Edward, and Jazz. It's been a wild ride.
Twists and turns galore.
But the most important thing to remember is that love is a journey. It's complex and it's always evolving. So embrace the messiness, keep those lines of communication open, and never stop exploring those connections. The human ones, I mean.
Couldn't have said it better myself.